You know, a gentleman isn't afraid to admit when he's wrong. But maybe that's it.
Maybe because there's too much green on the bezel.
Maybe.
Don't know.
Is it overcomplicated? And I hate to say that.
Or you're just not used to it because you must seen it.
Or I've just never seen it.
You're gonna have to wait and find out.
And on this one, I was wrong. Last night, I had the privilege of attending an Amiga VIP event at the Chisholm Hunter showroom in Edinburgh, and lo and behold, the watch that was there was the Amiga Seamaster 300M green dial, commonly known as the Seaweed. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, from images, I just thought the green was that little bit too vibrant. I just thought it was a little bit too much for my tastes. But when I saw it in person, it's totally different to the images. The white dial will always be king in my eyes, but the green's up there. Welcome back to Time in the Wrist at Chisholm Hunter. My name is Harrison, as always, and let's crack straight into the specs of this Amiga Seamaster Seaweed edition. I've actually pretty much memorized the specs for my white Amiga Seamaster, but let's look at the green. The case diameter on this watch comes in at the same as every other Seamaster. It comes in at 42mm. Now, when I was at this event, I tried it on the rubber and I tried it on the bracelet. Unfortunately, I didn't try it on the NATO. However, I am a fan of the NATO and I do own a NATO for my own Amiga Seamaster. I do have to say that when it was on the bracelet, it looked a little bit more chunky to me and maybe a little bit too big for my wrists rather than the rubber. The rubber looked a little bit smaller and I don't really know why it was. I think it was just because it was a darker colored rubber strap. Now the rubber strap comes in green, but it is not a vibrant green like you might think from the website. It is a very dark, almost seaweed green, hence the nickname. The thickness on this watch comes in at 13.56mm, so exactly the same as my Amiga that's sitting at home and the versions that you are all used to. Now, this does sit quite high off of the wrist, especially if you have a NATO strap on it. With that said, I'm a huge fan of the NATO. That's why I have it on my Amiga at the moment. And I do feel that because this is a green dial, you can style it really differently with those different colored NATO straps. So I'd have a play around with them. They do push it quite high off the wrist, but it's not unbearable. I mean, I've got one. The weight on this model comes in at 198 grams. This is for the full bracelet version. So it is a hefty watch, but remember that it is a diver that goes to 300 meters and a good looking diver at that. The case and the bracelet come in stainless steel. Now, stainless steel, of course, shines extremely bright in the light. It is a very white metal. Comparison to titanium especially, titanium's a lot more dark and kind of has a more stealthy vibe around it, whereas stainless steel is quite bright, it is quite airy, and because of the brightness of that metal, the dark face, that dark green dial and bezel pops out so much more. Now, the polished and brushed steel on the bracelet gives it a pretty cool look, but I would always go for the rubber or the NATO. I just think it suits the Amiga Seamaster so much more, and also in my lifestyle, I do tend to get the metal scratched on the bracelet because I'm a bit clumsy. That's why I've got my Tissot PRX on. It has predominantly brushed metal, which doesn't show scratches as much, but if you look at the back of the clasp, it's already pretty knackered. The bracelet on this watch actually has macro adjustments at the buckle, and it also has a deployant clasp. Now, it is a nice thing when you have a wetsuit on. I never have, but it is a diving watch to have those micro adjustments to extend over your wetsuit and become a diver. It is a diving watch, but I'm a desk diver. I don't need it. So I would go for the NATO or the rubber, it's just my preference. Moving quickly onto the bezel and the face, and this is where this kind of review, if you will, gets quite interesting. When I first saw this in photos, when I first assessed this watch online, it just seemed too vibrant to me. It just seemed too flash, maybe is the word. But when I saw it at the event in Edinburgh, it was definitely a lot darker than I thought. It actually looks more black than it does green. And that I'm a huge, huge fan of that. I'm more of a fan of neutral colors, whites, blacks, dark stuff, or bright stuff, instead of, you know, your blues, your burgundies, your bright greens. I can't really do that. I don't know why, it just doesn't suit my aesthetic. So when I saw it in person, I was very pleasantly surprised, I have to say that. And what I would advise is to honestly just come into Chisholm Hunter and try it on and see the difference between the color online and the color in person. I don't know why I'm sitting like this, it's really weird. And the color in person, because they're just so different. Before we move on to the bezel and also the face of this watch, we've forgotten a very important detail. We've forgotten the crown and the helium escape valve. Now, the crown is obviously a screw down crown supporting a water resistance of 300 meters. It's quite short, quite stubby. It doesn't dig into the wrist in any way, and it doesn't have sharp edges, which I like to see from crowns, because when they have sharp edges, sometimes your wrist can go into it and it hurts, and it's just kind of a design flaw in some watches. The Omega is very much smooth to touch. The bezel on this model is of course dark, stealthy, let's say seaweed green, and it has white numerals around it, which is highly readable, especially because the green is a lot darker than I actually thought it was. The numerals are a lot easier to read. Now, I'm actually quite heavily dyslexic, so when things are sort of merge in together, when the colors are too close together, I really struggle with it, and it might be a dyslexic thing, or it might just be a kind of visibility thing, you can't see the colors. But I do prefer contrasting colors, and that's why I like the fact that this green Seamaster is so dark green instead of light green. It's just easier to read. It's easier on the wrist. When you glance at it, you can tell the time pretty quick. Now, it goes without saying that ceramic is of course highly, highly durable, and I've had my Omega Seamaster for give or take 2 years, 2 to 3 years. Don't have a nick on the ceramic bezel. With that said, there is, I wouldn't say a con, but I would say something to consider when buying this Omega Seamaster. The glass on this Omega is sapphire crystal, which is brilliant. It is very, very durable, but it has anti-reflective coating on both sides. Technically speaking, the anti-reflective coating scratches off, or can scratch off, a little bit faster and a little bit easier. With that said, as I said before, I've had my Omega Seamaster for 2 to 3 years, not got one scratch on it. And if you guys watch the channel, you'll watch the watch vlog. I'm out and about all the time, and it's been pretty epic with me, so I don't think it'll be an issue. On that note, it is time for the wrist check here at Chisholm Hunter. What is on your wrist today? I do hope it is an Omega Seamaster, because I didn't wear my Omega Seamaster today, actually. I wore my Tissot PRX, the green dial. It's fabulous. Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to have that conversation. Let's dive into the face a little bit more then. So the face has that iconic wave motif running through it, and that wave motif is, of course, very, very dark green. Now, it goes without saying that when you have an Omega Seamaster, based on the light that you put it in, totally changes the look and aesthetic of the watch, because the colors just change so much. I mean, last night we were filming this watch in the light and it looked bright green. Then we were filming it in the dark and it looked extremely dark green. It honestly has two different personalities in the light or in the dark. The hands on the face of this watch are actually skeletonized, meaning you can actually see through them. They don't have any meat around them, so to speak. They aren't filled. And this is also an interesting one because it's kind of like Marmite. Some people hate it, some people really love it. It's a bit like that helium escape valve. Now, the reason that I like it, and I'm not trying to make your decision for you, you can form your own opinion, but I'm just telling you mine. When the hands are covering the Omega logo, you can still see the logo through the hands because they are skeletonized. That is just a small point that makes me actually quite attracted to these skeletonized hands. Also, they're a little bit rarer. I mean, you don't see skeletonized hands as much, but let me know what you think in the comments on that one, because it's an interesting debate. The date window doesn't even need me talking about it to say that it's brilliant, because it's obviously at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock is better than 3 o'clock, everybody knows that. But what I would love to see, what I think would be absolutely epic, and if Omega did this, I can see it being the pinnacle release from Omega on whichever year they do this, is a no-date version of the Seamaster. I just think that would look so, so clean. The indices are big and bold and very easy to read. They're a combination of circles and little rectangles, and they look really, I don't want to say readable because that's too easy to say. I'd say simplistic. They aren't over complicated. At a glance, you know exactly what time it is. And coming back to the personal aspect of this, because I'm dyslexic, I don't actually like reading numbers. I don't actually like reading period. So to have sort of circles and rectangles instead of the numerals that you normally have, I actually quite like that. And on that note, the indices are actually raised off the surface of the watch, creating a really nice level of depth. I mean, if you think about it, you have the wave motif, so that's 2 levels of depth. You also have the date window sitting below that. Then you have the indices in the hands that are stacked on top of each other. Then you have the sapphire crystal glass in the bezel. There is so much depth going on there. And to add to that, it also has super luminova on the hands, indices, and a little dot on the bezel, making a fully functional dive watch. The super luminova is a combination of green and blue and shines extremely bright in the dark. We were actually filming it in the sun at the Chisholm Hunter store, and we came back into the store. It wasn't really dark. I'd say it was kind of midday, but it was a bit more gloomy in the store because we were just going up the staircase, and it was shining bright even though it was light. It's cool. The last detail on the dial that I did notice quite quickly, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. On my white Omega Seamaster, on the tip of the second hand, you have a red splash. And also the word Seamaster is red. Now, I do prefer neutral colors. I've said this in every single review, but I do like that, sprinkle of salt. I like that little splash, little detailing that highlights a word or highlights a hand, whatever it is. The second hand and the word Seamaster on this green version aren't colored. Now, I know that the color red wouldn't go with green. I'm not suggesting that at all, but what I would have liked to have seen is just a little bit of a splash of color there. Now, red and green don't go, maybe yellow, I don't know. Let me know, what do you think? Before we go on to the movement, I have to say something really important. If you enjoy these videos and you enjoy watches in general and want to join our fantastic watch community and also come to the VIP events, come say hi, come talk watches, please hit this. It's not actually going to be, it'll be down here. Please hit that subscribe button. It honestly helps us more than you know, and we would really appreciate it. The movement in this Omega is the movement that we've all grown to love over the years. It's the Omega Caliber 8800. It's a self-winding movement with a coaxial escapement, certified by Master Chronometer, approved, of course, by Metas, and resistant to magnetic fields reaching 15,000 Gauss. It has a free sprung balance with silicon balance spring. It's automatic winding in both directions. It's rhodium plated finish, it has a rhodium plated finish with Geneva waves in arabesque. And to top it off, it has a 55-hour power reserve. The movement is of course visible through the exhibition case window or case back so that you can see into that movement. Now, the purpose of this video is to highlight that you should never judge a book by its cover. Online, this watch looks so different to what it does in person. And on my wrist, it will look different to what it is in your wrist. And in what light you have it in will depend on what color it comes out at. So there's so many differences, and a gentleman is not afraid to admit when he's wrong. And on this one, I was wrong. Thank you so much for watching this Chisholm Hunter video. My name is Harrison. As always, if you enjoy, please hit this subscribe button. It helps more than you know. And we'll also get a little video here that you can enjoy after this video. We'll see you next time.